Hi, thanks for joining me. I wanted to talk about not a poem, but a something I'd written on my Facebook wall. Um, it's about my feelings, that magical time in childhood when I was in my tweens, not quite teen age. My childhood about the TV shows, the impact of these TV shows on me. There was a time. It's weird because I like the 1980s and the 1960s in terms of entertainment, but there was a weird experience growing up having TV shows in the 1980s that were sequel series to some of the big hits from the 1960s, like Leave It to Beaver, The Munsters, Star Trek, Twilight Zone, shows like that. And I wanted to talk about that. See, before I go on, let me explain. It may be nothing, but yesterday I was practicing makeup for for the Halloween party in about 3 weeks on the 21st, and I'm going to somebody's party, Halloween party, and I'd gone last year as the same thing, but I've learned quite a bit since then. So I was doing that, and so I think I got all of it off. That would explain why it's stupid. I was wearing a wig, and I didn't have a wig cap, so I have one. I just didn't bother to put it on. It was a trial run, so if you see some hair sticking, that's why, and I think I got all of my makeup off. Anyway, I'm debating still whether I should show it on this YouTube channel. I figure I should just put it all together in one video rather than like mentioning it in another video, a different video, just because if I want to take it out or privatize it, I won't be privatizing some other topic I want to talk about. It'd be easier in editing. Okay, so anyway, let's get back to that topic. It's a topic that I thought about and I kind of romanticized in my mind, and I call it magical and so forth, but I haven't really described it. Last night I was watching, it's like 11 o'clock at night because today is a Sunday and I don't have to go into work until, darn it, it's like a siren or a phone ringing or something whenever you make these videos. Anyway, actually I hope you got that on camera. I got that on camera, I hope. Anyway, be funny. I hope that's not near me. I hope that's not somebody I know. Okay, so I was watching like around 11 o'clock because I can stay up late. I don't have to go into my afternoon job until 3 o'clock. Actually, like 2:45 and then start at 3 o'clock. I was watching, I think it was called, I can't remember the name of the title. Center Seat. It was called Center Seat. I subscribed to Amazon Prime, and excuse me, there's a multi-part, like 10-part or 11-part series on the production of Star Trek through the years, and each episode deals with a certain series. If you don't know, I've talked a lot about Star Trek. I might as well mention it here. I will in this video later on, probably anyway. The first episode is about the original series and how that got off the ground, and not so much the daily production of it, but the logistics of the ups and downs, and creating it and pitching a show and so forth. Learning about Star Trek gave me a lot of education in terms of what goes on behind the scenes, how you pitch a TV show, what the series Bible looks like, what to do in terms of casting, sets, locations, and budgetary constraints, and dealing between the studio and the network and so forth. That was fascinating. So I kind of a counterpoint to the magical aspect that I'm going to get into. Trust me, I'm going to get into it. The magical aspect of just watching as a viewer these different shows as a viewer, as a young child. Anyway, I was watching Center Seat, and I was inspired enough to write this thing that I put on my wall, my Facebook wall. Here, let me just read it. I'm rewatching a Star Trek documentary about the infighting and evolution. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Strike that. I was watching Center Seat, and it was what I was talking about, but this was actually before that. I was watching a documentary called Chaos on the Bridge. It's just one single documentary. I have it on DVD as well, but sometimes it's more convenient to I was looking up Star Trek something or other, and I wanted to see it, and that popped up on Amazon Prime. So anyway, it's about the Next Generation, Star Trek The Next Generation. It came out in 1987, ended in 94, 7 years, and it was talking about basically the chaos that happened behind the scenes of the show. They kept saying something like 30 different writers. There was a turnover, about 30 writers and staff just leaving or quitting or being fired or whatever. And the series creator, Gene Roddenberry, a little bit of Star Trek history, Gene Roddenberry had created the show in 1964, and then he was able to sell it to Desilu, named after and run by Lucille Ball. If you don't know who that is, oh boy, I feel old. And then they were able to get it to NBC, and NBC was footing half the bill for the episode, half the bill for the production costs, and then Desilu would foot the other bill, and then sometimes Lucille Ball would put in, according to Center Seat, would put in some of her own money to do it. So people call it, oh, that's a cheap set and it's just cardboard or whatever. But you have to realize that, number one, according to what was said in, I think, Center Seat or Chaos on the set, I think it was Center Seat, that the production costs were low, somewhat low. I say somewhat because there's a caveat, what I'm going to say. It was a television show, and inflated for cost, today it would be like $1 million per episode. Or it was like $500,000, something like that, but inflated for later costs, taking into account inflation, it would be a lot of money still. And it was science fiction, and perhaps the perception was that science fiction wasn't as popular, so they were trying to justify the cost, and many times, there are different myths that pop up in Star Trek lore, like it only saw success after the cancellation of the show, after 3 years, and when it was in syndication and nobody was watching TV and cheap sets and so forth. Well, to dispel some myths, they in the past 10 years or something, they actually revealed the actual ratings for the show, and it was many times beating the other two networks. There are only 3 networks: ABC, NBC, and CBS. It was on NBC, and there was a good fan following. And when they were trying to making this into a Star Trek history thing, which I wanted to do in another episode. I was debating whether to make another video about it. But anyway, okay. So it turned out it was successful after all when they actually look at the numbers. But it was just the way it was put in this documentary was it was not cost effective enough. It was okay, but it wasn't cost effective to justify. No, strike that. It was doing well, but it wasn't doing well enough to justify the huge expenses. I'll put it that way. That's the clearest way of putting it. How did I got into Star Trek, and that becomes a wormhole, rabbit hole. Anyway, so I was watching that. Okay, let me go back to what I was talking about, my Facebook wall. I'm rewatching a Star Trek documentary about the infighting and evolution of Star Trek The Next Generation production. The documentary is titled Chaos on the Bridge because, let me, as an aside, so Gene Roddenberry created the show, and then he, in the beginning of the third season, or really the second half of the second season, he wanted a good time slot, and it was draining on him, like 6 days a week, 14-hour days or something, and Gene Roddenberry basically stepped away. Forget it. I'm not dealing with this. So they kept him on as a consultant or somehow the creator of the show. But somebody else stepped in. Paramount actually stepped in, and Fred Freiberger took over the role, and he ran the show in the third season. And from what I've heard from another channel, YouTube channel, it was probably about the best slot that they could have picked. They were actually trying to turn it around and make a big success out of it. So anyway, that doesn't last. It ends. It gets canceled after the third season, and then syndication comes up. So then Gene Roddenberry and then the first motion picture, and then the other motion pictures. But Gene Roddenberry really isn't involved, actively integral to the motion pictures. Again, it was Paramount Studios having control of it, and it was their baby now. And so 20 years later, 1986, exactly 20 years later, they asked Gene Roddenberry if he would like to come in. They expressed interest in doing a sequel TV series of Star Trek The Next Generation. So the sense from the documentary, and they interview key people, the sense from the documentary Chaos on the Bridge was that he had his ideas about how to do television. Let me rephrase that. He became so protective of this vision of his that he wanted it to depict a perfect future where humanity had no conflicts, and which that presents a problem in and of itself, because if you're writing drama, you must have conflict. You must have some sense that you're struggling to overcome some obstacle. So he kept changing things in the scripts. Apparently, he kept voicing this vision of a utopian world, utopian vision of the 24th century. And of course, utopian, utopos means no world in Greek. And I interpret that to mean it's almost like this doesn't really depict an actual world. No world, utopos. So anyway, he became so protective. The other writers became frustrated, and one writer was actually took it to heart. He had a more optimistic view of it. Constructive view of it. He said that it forced him to come up with new ways of telling stories. That's pretty interesting. All right, so let me get back to this. All right, I'm rewatching a Star Trek documentary about infighting and evolution of Star Trek The Next Generation production. The documentary is titled Chaos on the Bridge. This was a show aired 20 years after the original series. The 1980s were a magical time from a child's perspective. There were intriguing current shows that were sequels to hit shows 20 years prior. If you had cable television, you'd have some entry into the older series, something current that acted as a gateway. It's like watching a show straddling between two decades. Gidget The Munsters, Leave It to Beaver, and The Twilight Zone. What made it magical to me as a tween? Oh, I'm sorry, let me strike. What made it magical to me as a tween? I have a reference for the quality of drama in those 1960s shows, even the drama in well-constructed comedies. In the 1980s shows, it was like someone had kindled the flame of what made the original so fascinating and let it flicker again. Visions of the new gadget riding a surfboard flash through my mind as I write this. Moments of the new Leave It to Beaver play in my mind, alternating with the black and white original. They're exploring what it's like to be a child. The new Twilight Zone still demonstrating what imaginative fantasy drama can do. I was still exploring the landscape around me, virginal, and now I'm describing what it was like, I'm describing as a child what it was like. I was still exploring the landscape around me, virginal to what had come before my birth. No adult responsibilities. On television, I could be excited to see a mermaid, a flying saucer, a spaceship, or alien. My mind didn't yet dwell on the background logistics of TV production. My childhood senses merely soaked up these delicacies. Like a baby mesmerized by a dangling keychain, I didn't question how the story was being told because I had faith. I had faith that they would tell the story well. I may become enchanted by something on screen, only later to learn it had its origins years earlier in some other production. Thank you, Nickelodeon. Thank you, Disney Sunday Night Movie. All this is why I wanted to create television shows. And I got a response back, and I commented on that response. But I don't know what else there is to say that I haven't said in that. I want to keep calling it a poem. It's not a poem. I guess it's a free verse poem in some sense. But I wanted to, I had thought about it. I had romanticized that feeling in my mind, but I hadn't written anything about what it felt like. That's what I wanted to get in this video. I wanted to describe what it felt like as a child. I was born in 1975, so 1985 I would have been 10, and 1987 exactly I would have been 12 years old. So it was my tween years. There's just some weird quirk about seeing both the 1960 shows and the 1980 shows side by side. Like, I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'd already seen all of the episodes in 1 year, 1987. Actually, only a few months. I had caught up. I had begun watching Star Trek: The Original Series around January, and then by the summer, certainly by August, and then by September, when the new Next Generation premiered, I had seen all the episodes, and I'd been really, really familiar with it, the comic books and so forth. I devoted that to another video earlier in my channel. But so I was familiar with that, and then seeing the Next Generation 20 years later. In addition to that, I want to get into those other shows. The New Gidget. Now, I watched The New Gidget. I was familiar with the New Gidget TV show. I hadn't seen the original with Sally Field, and so for me, Gidget called to mind the New Gidget, played by some other actress, and I didn't know they had recurring characters. I mean, they had a few characters from the original TV show when she was a child, but they were played by different cast members, and I didn't know much. I liked watching it. I didn't really get into the plots of the New Gidget, but I just simply enjoyed watching them surf. I liked, it was in a nice sunny neighborhood. I was in California, and I just enjoyed watching it. And maybe that's partly what the liking was for the original Gidget. um, and the new Leave It to Beaver. Now, I believe I had watched the original Leave It to Beaver for a little bit, maybe not, but it was like the two came right on. That's what I want to express. It's like these two shows, the 1960s original and the sequel series 20 years later, like would come on and air simultaneously, and I was exposed to both of them. The same way with the Munsters and the new Twilight Zone. So I could see them back to back, and I could. I don't want to say compare. I want to say like, well, yeah, really, I am comparing, because a lot of these shows I'm talking about were black and white, and here there's a color version. It's 20 years later, and how does it change with the times? Like Leave It to Beaver in 1950 something or other, excuse me, and then the new Leave It to Beaver. It wasn't just this came to mind. It wasn't just fan service. They were doing the show as they had done it in the original series. I mean, I'm talking about all these series. The Munsters, it's a little different, but it's like they can go home again. There's a phrase, you can't go home again. It's like they were going home again, and they were producing new shows, new episodes in their respective shows. And with like Leave It to Beaver, the thrust of the original show was that they were, what was it like to be a kid growing up? And then in the new Leave It to Beaver, there was an interesting mix of characters. You had the original characters grown up, and so and keep in mind this is like half an hour each episode. Some episodes they dwelt on what was it like to be an adult. Not just what was it like to be an adult, but like the human condition. I don't remember the episodes. I haven't watched it in a while. The new Leave It to Beaver, or the old Leave It to Beaver, but the new Leave It to Beaver. I remember them exploring like the characters' feelings more, and like motivations, and you like there was one episode with oh nuts, I can't remember the annoying best friend of Wally. I can't remember, his name is blanking on me, but there was one episode where he's he feels stuck in a rut in his job, and so he gets together the other characters and they form a band, and it's just something so wonderful about just taking a premise like that. It doesn't have to be big. It just explores, somebody feeling stuck and just trying something new, and just explores that. And there's another one where it was a musical episode too. There's one where Wally, it starts off with Wally, his little brother, who's now, they're both adults, Beaver, and with the Eddie is his name, Eddie Haskell, and Eddie tries to convince Wally to try the motorcycle, and so like the Beaver says he hasn't been on a motorcycle since he's seen Easy Rider, and so he gets on the motorcycle and he gets into an accident, and then for the rest of the episode, I would call like a near-death experience, where you see your life flashing before your eyes, and so you see clips from the original show and clips from earlier new Leave It to Beaver episodes. Technically, I guess you could call it a clip show, but it was more than that. It was one of the better clip shows. As a matter of fact, you could tell they filmed extra scenes that took place before the original series, where he remembers it was about learning to swim, and it was I don't remember the earlier clips in the episode, but the clips began to take on a theme of falling, like literally, like falling off your bike and getting back on. And he and I remember one moment, like a clip from the original series, just a shot from the original series, where the beaver is sitting at the tables for some episode. Beaver is sitting there and he says, why are you concerned, Wally? Or what's going on, Wally? And taken in context of this, it was really wonderful the way they merged them together, because you're looking into, you're like watching episode through Wally's eyes, like literally, like he's having this near-death experience. And they show newly filmed clips that were supposed to take place before the original series, where they show a younger Wally and a younger father, Ward Cleaver, and something about trying out for the swim team. And of course, I think he was very athletic in the original TV series, but he was probably in the swim team somewhere in the TV series. But it was something about him learning how to swim, and Ward gives him advice, like basically saying, you gotta get back in and keep trying. And so then at some point, from what I remember, the shots between the black and white and the color kind of alternate more rapidly as he's, as the episode climaxes. And I think the line from the beaver was, what you thinking about, Wally? Or something like that, clearly showing concern. And then he wakes up from the motorcycle accident. It was just well done. And people poo-poo television, but I guess that's one of the close examples of why I think that was a magical time to watch television. They're really well written and well constructed. And as I said before in the Facebook thing, the Facebook post, that's why I wanted to go into television. And I haven't watched current television in quite a while, in probably a number of years. And I don't know if I've lost, I don't want to say I've lost interest in writing for television. The kind of television I'm talking about, I certainly haven't lost interest in that. But my career path, my life path has inhibited me from writing for television. I'm not living in Los Angeles. Sometimes I think about going to the high school reunion that's coming up next year, should be coming up next year. There's been some chatter about it on Facebook. Class of 1994, and I'm not the television writer, television series creator that I didn't tell anybody that I wanted to be. And I've written some screenplays, and I've talked about how to write good drama, but I haven't become that success. Leave It to Beaver and The Munsters. I enjoyed The Munsters, the original show, and they were airing that alongside Munsters Today. It was weird because they were also sometimes on different channels. On different channels. Thankfully, I had cable television, so I was able to enjoy these. I could go on and on. Maybe I should. There are some new Twilight Zone episodes that come to mind. I remember, it's my new YouTube channel. I might as well. the new Twilight Zone, I remember um, a matter of, I think it's called A Matter of Time, where this couple, uh, I get the impression like a newlywed couple, um, discover these men in all blue tights, like everything covered in blue, or black, I think, taking everything away. And they're so concerned that nobody else notices these people. I guess they see them, and then time continues, and nobody. It's been a long time since I've seen the episode, but I guess maybe they talk to each other. They can't find any. I think nobody's around, and they roam the neighborhood trying to find some help because they keep seeing these strangers picking things up and taking them away, and they find out that they're caught in between time. And I don't remember when I had seen the TV series Amazing Stories, but it was executive produced, I think, by Steven Spielberg. I know Steven Spielberg was involved, and I think it only lasted 2 seasons. I tried to get all the episodes on DVD, purchase them on DVD, and I remember, I think I have 2 season sets, and I'm not sure if that's all of Amazing Stories or not. But that was a Twilight Zone-esque show, and it aired sometime in the 1980s. And even though I wasn't a tween, I was like 7 or 8. At this point, I might as well mention V, the TV series. I had seen V, and then V, The Final Battle. They were mini-series. V came out, I think it was in like 1983, maybe off by a year or two. V by Kenneth Johnson, and he had already been somebody, he'd already set himself up, established himself as somebody who could adapt some other property into a TV show. Like he had taken The Incredible Hulk from the comic books, and he made I would say, hit TV series. It's certainly enjoyed now. I'm sure there are people who fondly remember the TV series with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. And he took later on in 1990, he took the movie Alien Nation, and he adapted it to television. And I really enjoy the television series. Only lasted 1 season plus some subsequent TV movies. Because they canceled the show after 1 season, and then they still had story material they had to resolve, so they made sequel TV movies. I like that more than the actual movie upon which it was based. And I don't remember what else Kenneth Johnson did, but those stick out. He could adapt a TV show. So he wanted to do, according to what I had read online, he wanted to do a drama about the Nazis rising to power. And I don't remember exactly what the reason was, but it was something about showing Nazi atrocities on television like 8 o'clock or something. So instead, he did it in as a science fiction allegory. He had aliens coming in as visitors. That's what the V is, V for visitor. And they look human, and they come in spaceships. And it's interesting if you actually notice, hope I'm not, well, spoilers, whatever. The symbol is something like this, and then they have 2 dots, and if you look up at it in a certain way, it comes out looking like a Nazi swastika. And they come from the planet orbiting Sirius. I think it's the 4th planet orbiting Sirius, because I pay attention to these details. And they cure cancer and stop war and all these other interesting things. They provide these new medicines and so forth, like for a moment, it's like the day the earth stood still. The movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's like nothing else happens on Earth. It's like everybody is so captivated by these aliens, these motherships appearing in over major cities, and for that moment, there, the implication anyway being is that there's no war, like there's no conflict, like everybody's just transfixed by these aliens coming in, and so over time, so this is in the 2-hour movie. It's spread over, I think, 2 nights. Maybe it was just a one-time. No, I remember it being split into 2, because I remember part 2 airing sometime later, and they were recapping what happened originally. So maybe it was like 4 hours or something. It was like it was a made-for-TV movie. So the visitors, they're behind. You don't really know what they're like, but some scientists are denigrated, and the whole concept of science is denigrated, and then people turn up missing. I don't know how they came up with that phrase, but anyway, people become missing, and so you follow different families, and there's one family whose grandfather survived the Holocaust. He was in a concentration camp, and he says he's suspicious of these visitors, and he thinks perhaps that their intentions aren't so good for us. And there's a young guy who is in love with this girl, and he becomes part of the youth movement. I didn't think I'd be talking about Nazis when I started this video, but he joins the visitor youth movement, and he gets a nice uniform, and so the youth movement is encouraged to report anybody that is questioning or suspicious of these visitors, and so he reports his parents, and it's all fascinating stuff. So over time, by the end of the movie, there's this 5th column that develops of people who, it's like a secret group of people who want to revolt or work, counteract this visitor invasion. And so then that movie did well, and I'm not sure if they had plans at that point to do a follow-up movie, but they did. About a year later, they did V, The Final Battle, and that seemed successful. And so they did a 1-season. Why do these things always seem to be 1 season long when they get canceled? Anyway, they did a 1-season follow-up series to that. So I have all of them on DVD, and they came out in Blu-ray, actually, or at least the first one came out on Blu-ray, thankfully. And Kenneth Johnson actually, I don't know if he was actually involved with it, but I know that they did a follow-up TV series called V sometime in 2000 something, and I really like the original. I haven't seen much of the newer version. It didn't seem to apply. There's something, and I guess I'm talking about 1960s and 1980s shows back to back. I might as well talk about this. What made that not seem appealing, whereas I preferred the original? I thought fondly about the original TV show. Why do I ask that? Because my whole point in this video is talking about 1960s and 1980s and seeing them back to back. Was it because I had watched them back to back, and time-wise, they were almost the same experience. And here I watched the 1983, give or take a year or something, original, and then here about 20 years later, again 20 something years later, they put out a new version of the series. And am I in a different frame of my life? Is it because there's a huge time gap, a huge lapsement in time between them? Or is it because the writing was different? I know in the 1960s and 1980s shows, the 1980s sequel shows seem to capture some, excuse me, hope that doesn't gross anybody out, seem to take the original. There was like an emphasis like on maintaining consistency with the original, like capturing what made the original so well liked. And maybe it's because V seemed like a different series. There's another series that I enjoyed. Actually, I didn't enjoy it, but there was a series, Battlestar Galactica, and I wasn't old enough really. I could have. It was barely after I was born, so I could. Well, blah 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 blah. It didn't happen. As far as I remember, I didn't watch the show. I was familiar with it, sort of. And then about 20 years, sometime in 2000 something or 1990 something, they did a Battlestar Galactica remake or reboot. I'll just be safe and call it a reboot. Well, they're different things, remake or reboot. And it was different. And I don't want to comment on which one I prefer because I haven't sampled enough of the newer version. But it was clear that they were going in a different direction. It was clear that it was being told differently from the original. Whereas, like the shows I talked about before, Leave It to Beaver and the Munsters. The Munsters was a little bit different. New Leave It to Beaver, New Twilight Zone, Star Trek. They were. It seems to me they were cognizant of what made the original well liked, and they were simply updating. So from my point of view, it seemed like they were simply updating it for modern time. And the shows I mentioned, V and Battlestar Galactica, they were purposely doing a different take on the concept. Maybe that's why it seems so different from the 80s and 60s shows I was talking about. I don't want to end this video I don't want to end this video prematurely and then think of, oh, I should have said this. Let me pause here, see if I can just take a moment and think through if there's anything else. And I can't seem to. Shoot. Okay. Hi, I thought for a while, and there is something else I wanted to talk about. I got off on that concept of 80s and 60s versions of the same show, but I missed something else I talked about here. That sense of wonder and that sense of fantasy. I talked about, on television, I could be excited to see a mermaid, a flying saucer, a spaceship, alien. My childhood senses were just soaking up all these delicacies, like a baby mesmerized by a dangling keychain. It was also the shows that were on at the time. I remember sitcoms, but I also remember a lot of fantasy shows. I put Mermaid in there specifically because I remember Splash 2 um, on the Disney Sunday night movie. It was split up into two. You know, they only had 1 hour. The Disney Sunday night movie was obviously on Sunday evening, and it only aired for 1 hour. It was only scheduled for 1 hour. So they took this TV movie that was a sequel to a 1984 fondly remembered movie called Splash, and it was a 2 hour movie, so they split into 2 nights, and it was in May 1988, and the weird sense of fate, it aired in the same week as on a different station. Maybe it was NBC. They had a movie called Something Is Out There, and that was a pilot to a TV series that didn't last long, about a cop. Usually these things are cops. A cop, like an alienation as a cop. This cop who discovers, well, he's investigating these murders, and there's this mysterious woman that he sees, and he finds out that she's actually an alien, and they all strangely are human-like, and her ship crashed, and then she said when she meets the cop, the two start talking to each other. She says that their ship was carrying mental patients, and the mental patient was, or very like a psychotic being, and the psychotic being is the one that's killing off the people on Earth. And that was the pilot for a somewhat interesting TV show. Now, this is part of the crux of my video. When I was a child, I wasn't thinking about these shows critically. I was just absorbing, and I knew what I liked, and this tantalized me. This tantalized my imaginative, creative spirit. So I didn't think of them in terms of production. I didn't think of them in terms of drama. I didn't think of them in terms of how you tell a story. I just was appealed by something about the premise appealed to me, and just like when I'm watching a movie trailer, if the premise seems to appeal to me, then I'll try it out. So I'm more of a premise person than a character person. I like watching movies and stories with interesting characters, but a lot of people say, well, I like the characters and the characters weren't interesting, so I won't watch it, or I'm not intrigued by the show or something or other, or the movie, what have you. But so they say, oh, the characters are paramount in importance. And then there are other people, well, the plot is more important than the characters. And to me, it's the premise, it's the concept. That's paramount over everything else. And you come up with a good premise, intriguing premise. Without an intriguing premise, you really don't have much of a story. And then you fill it with characters that comment on the premise. And that works into how you do a plot, how you do your plot. You plot out the events of these characters involved in this intriguing premise. So I'm delving kind of into Dramatica theory. If you want to learn about Dramatica, I've done videos before, and I should learn how to add cards. When I go back and I'll edit these videos, I'll add in more things, like I'm starting to add thumbnails and more effects in YouTube. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. I enjoyed, there were a lot of fantasy type of shows at the time, and I really gravitated towards that. I mentioned V before. I liked Alien Nation, although that was a little bit older. When I was a little bit older, 1990. I was born in 1975. You do the math. I think it was like 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. I just there it's and I've talked before about something about my psyche, if that's the correct word, enjoying things that are outside what's considered normal. There's the mundane and the usual, and then there's the unusual, and I'm drawn towards that, like UFOs and Bigfoot and Bermuda Triangle and ghosts. I'm drawn towards that. I'm drawn towards the paranormal and fantasy and the supernatural. It's because I guess perhaps perhaps it says that I want escape from the mundane, and I think more imaginative people want that part of their mind to be exercised, and I guess I'm one of those people. So that just about says what I need to say. So if you like this content, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and like this video, please. I'm trying to grow this channel. I have other things that take up my time, but I am trying to build this channel and improve on its look. So I hope you have a good day, and I hope you have a good week, whatever. I post these videos on a weekly basis, at least one every week. And so I'll see you next time, and hope you have a good time in between. Thanks. Bye.